the Lord told Gideon to take his men down to the river and have them drink. The men who flopped on their bellies and drank like dogs were no good to him. Gideon watched as some men knelt and drank with their eyes watching the horizon, spears in hand. Though they were few, those were the men he needed.
Lieutenant Commander James Reece and his team of Navy SEALs, named Alpha Platoon, have a lead on a terrorist named Kahani, who is developing chemical weapons and has been hiding in Syria. As Reece and his team carry out their plan to get to him, they are ambushed and trapped, which results in Reece losing all of his men except one, Boozer. When he returns back home, two special agents interrogate him and ask him what went wrong with Donnie, a soldier who supposedly panicked and triggered an explosion. However, Reece argues that he remembers things differently, and Donnie was not the one who panicked. The one who triggered the explosion was a Syrian local who was their contact and would guide them through the tunnels. Reece believes that his team was set up and that somebody manipulated the audio files from the operations recordings, but can't prove anything. With nothing left to do, he returns home to his wife and daughter, and the next day, he is informed that Boozer committed suicide. Reece can't come to terms with that fact, and says that Boozer was fine yesterday when they flew in together, but the agents tell him that Boozer flew in alone. One day prior to Reece's return, Reece doesn't believe Boozer ended himself, and sets up a meeting with an accredited reporter named Katie Buranek. Although their meeting doesn't seem fruitful, it actually helps him understand that his mind is playing games on him. That makes him visit a clinic and have an hour-long engram brain scan, but when the scan is over, he is attacked by two masked men. He manages to take their gun and kill one of them, also realizing that the attackers were carrying his personal gun. Worried, he rushes back to his house, where he finds his wife and daughter killed. After burying his family and mourning them, Reece visits Admiral Pillar. First, Reece says he corrected his statement about Donnie because his memory was messed up, and then tells Pillar he thinks Kahani is targeting the Navy SEAL members. But he is not able to convince him. That same night, Katie visits Reece and says there was nobody found in the clinic where Reece claims he fought with two male attackers, revealing that the NCIS agent who has been assigned to Reece's case, Josh Holder, was the first person to arrive at the scene. Reece suspects Holder is working undercover for Kahani, and makes him the first name on his list. He then teams up with an old friend and CIA officer, Ben, who helps him steal some data from Holder's computer. While they dig for information, the news announces that Kahani has been killed during a military operation. To find out the truth, Reece breaks into Holder's house and examines his forearms because the man he fought in the clinic must have a wound on his left arm. Although Holder is clean, Reece presses him, and the agent reveals that he pulled up some information on Reece and gave it to a man who paid him, named Saul Agnon. Holder then tries to attack Reece, but the latter shoots and kills him. Reece Googles the man's name and discovers that Saul is an asset manager for a company named Capstone Industries. He meets with Katie and tells her about his findings while she reveals that she was able to get his brain scan from the clinic. She hands him the scan and tells him that he has a tumor that is causing him all the mental troubles he is facing. While they talk, Reece spots an assassin that is watching over them and tricks him. He gets caught up in a gunfight against the man and kills him. The following days, Reece and Ben acquire more information on Saul and are able to detain him in his own house. Having him tied onto a chair, Reece asks him why Capstone Industries wants him dead. Saul says he doesn't know much, but reveals that his company hired two Mexican assassins through a lawyer named Boykin, who deals in the black market. Furthermore, he reveals that his boss, Stephen Horn, is working on a project called RD-4895, but he has no access to it. Eventually, Reece asks how his boss was able to trap him and his men back in Syria, and Saul replies that Steve is a billionaire who has many powerful friends. Reece then kills Saul by injecting him with a narcotic cocktail, and then meets with Ben, telling him that he intends to go after Boykin next, so he can find the man who pulled the trigger on his family. The next morning, Reece climbs up a mountain and sets his sniper rifle up, waiting for Boykin to drive his car across the road. When the time is right, Reece takes the perfect shot, and Boykin loses control of his car. He then walks near him and hacks into Boykin's encrypted phone, stealing all the data from it, and finding the name of his family's killer. Meanwhile, Katie tries to lay low, and she spends some time with her brother's family. However, she soon finds out that Steve Horn's company is working with the government on creating nootropics, aka cognitive enhancers for military purposes. Reece and his friends, Ben, Liz, and Marco, then meet in Mexico, and they are able to find the person who killed Reece's wife and daughter. The team has to set up an operation because the Sicario is hiding in a secluded location, which the cartel is using as a training ground for its assassins. Reece and his team invade the place, and they kill many cartel members. Eventually, Reece gets his hands on his family's killer and drags the man's injured body to an empty warehouse. Being given the chance to avenge the death of his wife and daughter, he brutally murders the Sicario by hanging him with his own intestines. When Reece returns to the United States, there is only one thing left to do, and that is to get to Horn. However, FBI agents Leon and Wilson get to him first and ask him what Saul was doing the night he died from drug abuse, to which Horn replies that he has no idea because Saul was off the clock that night. Katie then reaches out to Dr. Mike Tedesco, the man who developed RD-4895, and corners him in the company's bathroom. She asks him if his drug can cause brain tumors, but Mike replies his drug is not yet ready for human trial. However, Katie asks him if his drug is connected to a Navy SEAL team that was killed off 2 months ago in Syria. Mike doesn't know a thing, but he starts digging and realizes that Horn borrowed a huge sum from the company 2 months ago. Mike copies some data into a thumb drive and meets with Katie again, saying that Horn was rushing to test the drug on humans, which he might have done with those soldiers. Since RD-4895 is supposed to reverse the encoding of trauma in the brain in order to prevent the development of PTSD in soldiers, and thus very interesting for the military. When Mike then gives the thumb drive to Katie, he is killed by Horn's men. Reece, who had followed Katie, is just in time to save her and takes the thumb drive from her. He sends the data to Ben, who is able to find more names that are involved in a high-stakes deal with Horn, some of them being high-ranked military officials such as Admiral Pillar. Continuing to deal with Horn, Reece detonates a bomb at the right moment in order to injure the billionaire and cause mayhem in the streets. Although Horn's security tries to defend him, Reece shoots them down and eventually kills Horn. Reece flees the scene, but he has the FBI on his tail. They manage to corner and injure him in an exchange of shots, but Reece is still able to escape through the mountains. After killing a deer so the police dogs lose his scent, the FBI brings in a military scout unit to go after him. Being at a disadvantage, Reece ambushes the unit by stunning them and attacks one of its members, stealing their backpack. The bad weather that night assists Reece because the FBI can't fly their drones to search for him. Reece has a short communication with Leon over the radio. Leon asks him when this hunt is going to be over, and Reece replies by telling him to go home because nothing is over until he does what he needs to do. The next day, the scout unit flies another drone off, but Reece shoots it down. However, they now know his exact location. The scout unit and some FBI agents get near him, but they don't know Reece has found some explosives in the backpack he stole and that he buried them in the dirt. Reece detonates the explosives and creates chaos. Using the window of opportunity, he escapes again. He goes back to Liz, who flies him away with her plane. After treating his wounds, Reece parachutes to a beach where Ben is waiting for him. Reece and Ben stake out Pillar's naval base, and they discuss that Commander Cox and Captain Howard were also involved in the whole cover-up of the drug test and ambush in Syria. They decide to go after them first, since Pillar never leaves the base. Meanwhile, Katie goes to Layan and tells him everything she knows. Layan runs an investigation on Admiral Pillar and finds out that the order for the drug test came straight from the Pentagon, and Madam Secretary of Defense Lorraine Hartley knew everything about it. Soon, Layan is taken off the case, and he tells Katie to write her story and publish it. Meanwhile, Reece and Ben have abducted Cox, Howard, and Howard's wife and son. Reece drowns Cox in the ocean, and then tells Howard that he needs to sacrifice himself if he wants his family to stay alive. Howard agrees, and is sent into Pillar's office with an explosive vest attached to his torso, and Reece detonates the bomb, killing both Howard and Pillar. At the same time, Katie writes her article and sends it to a publisher. However, her story is seized by the Secretary of Defense, and it never goes public. Hartley then visits Katie personally in the library and tells her her story is interesting, but she has gotten some of the facts wrong, offering herself for an interview in order to clarify things and hoping to exonerate herself. Hartley has a private talk with Katie and admits that she approved the testing of RD-4895 because she really wanted to help the soldiers deal with trauma, but she had no idea that the drug would give them tumors. She also clarifies she had no part in any cover-up in which Reece's team was killed, so as to hide the scandal of the experimental and tumor-causing new drug. Horn orchestrated the trap and execution of the Alpha Platoon team with Pillar, with her not being aware of it. After their discussion, Hartley tells Katie that she is free to publish her story now that she knows the truth. Thinking about it, Katie spots an inconsistency in Hartley's words, and she interviews her again, making her admit that she actually knew everything from the beginning. As the night progresses, Reece and Ben take out Hartley's security, and Reece breaches her safe room. Knowing that she will either be exposed or killed, Hartley grabs a pistol from her drawer and kills herself. 3 weeks later, Katie digs up information that a company called Oberon Analytics was paid by Horn, using a bank in Peru. When Katie informs Reece of this, he realizes that Ben always wanted to retire in Peru, and that the source of the wrong information that started the operation in Syria came from the CIA. Heartbroken, he concludes that Ben is the last name on his list. He tracks Ben down, and they have a final chat together. Ben claims he did it because Admiral Pillar had told him that Reece's team would be killed by their tumors anyway. Reece mentions that Ben also got paid $20 million, and Ben admits the money convinced him. But then, he regretted what he did, and he has not spent a dime of that money. Ben apologizes and prompts Reece to finish his list. An unapologetic Reece pulls the trigger and kills his best friend, completing the terminal list.